Hello and welcome. It's a webinar to introduce the Tyk MCP Gateway. For the more observant among you, you'll have noticed the gateway was launched 2 days ago. So my name's Christopher Chalice, and I've been the product manager within Tyk looking after the delivery of the gateway. I'm joined by Sedgi, who's our field CTO, and Laurentiu, who was the tech lead who led the technical implementation of the gateway. And we really do have a pretty packed agenda, so I want to get through the initial slides as soon as possible because the main crux of this is we'll have a demo to show how simple it is to govern an MCP server on Tyke, and we're going to introduce many of the enterprise features we've built to help you manage all of your MCP real estate there. But before that, what I would love to do is to explain, go back in time a little and explain the rationale for why we have built what we have built. So I am particularly long in the tooth in the software industry, seen many phases of the industry, and MCP has, I can now say categorically, without doubt, grown faster than any equivalent technology in my life. It's really hard to it's quite hard to fathom they're only launched in November 2024, and it was launched by Anthropic, the makers of Claude, who was obviously one of the more popular LLMs, but it was a very low-key launch. It was a specification, essentially. 3 months after that specification was published, OpenAI, a direct competitor, officially adopted it and added it to ChatGPT desktop and their agents SDK at that time. 1 month later, Google adopted it and they added the Gemini 2.5 support. These are possibly the three largest competitors in the AI space collaborating on one single technology that's about 3 months old from specification. This is unprecedented. Certainly, in my experience, completely unprecedented for competitors to collaborate so soon in the life cycle of an emerging technology. Microsoft adopted it in May, IBM followed, and this is impressive traction by this point. This tech's only 6 months old. Every major AI player, every major enterprise player has announced support for this technology. And what followed then was everybody involved in software and SaaS has seemed to extend their Surface offering to offer their own form of MCP support in some way, shape, or form. And it is safe to say now, this is not a fad. This is infrastructure. Um, within after the 12 after a year, because of the astronomical growth, it was donated to the Linux Foundation. And as Jensen Wang said, without hyperbole, this technology has completely revolutionized the AI landscape. But that astronomical growth hasn't been perfect. Uh, the astronomical growth has left behind one of my favorite articles called it a wild west of broken implementations. So the reason for this is most MCP servers are running locally. These are local implementations running with elevated privileges on people's laptops or desktops. The majority of the servers lack any sort of real authentication if there is authentication in place. Permissions, if they exist, tend to be really, really coarse, no audit trail. Agents, but under these conditions, agents can be tricked into taking destructive actions. And we've also seen a glut of MCP servers bring down innocent APIs that were completely unprepared for the onslaught of traffic for MCP. I mean, I've even seen huge enterprises like Slack had to rethink their entire API rate limit allowances because of the emergence of MCP. It does remind me of the early at this stage now. We're at the early stages of APIs before gateways emerged to help govern them. And like back then, it was a shadow IT, but we're seeing shadow IT now, but for AI. So you guys are likely here um, because you're somewhere on your journey to building AI agents and agentic workflows. Yeah, they're building, planning, thinking about it. Uh, and there's quite a few considerations to go into there. Maybe you want to develop a support agent that needs access to query your customer databases, or a DevOps agent, something that is to automate your infrastructure tasks. All of these agents need access to your internal infrastructure, your databases, your APIs, your backend services. And right now, teams are building access to these services in very ad hoc ways. And this is a consequence of the technology being so immature. So even the latest iteration of the MCP spec, I would probably say authentication's possibly the most immature area within the specification. There is some recommended approaches to authentication, however, they are contradictory often in terms of the specifications. So I do expect this is the area that will mature within MCP over the coming years. But right now, what we are seeing firsthand is teams are building access and custom authentication in ad hoc ways. No centralized control, no centralized governance. Observability is a bit flaky. No control plane, no uniform control planes. So I mean, we have plenty to offer in this space. I mean, we've spent well over a decade now managing protocols, REST, SOAP, gRPC, WebSockets, plethora of streaming technologies, and every time a new communication patterns emerged, enterprises have needed a governance layer around it, and we've built it. And agentic protocols are the latest chapter in that story. I mean, MCP absolutely has its own quirks, its own behaviors, but the fundamentals of this technology or the requirements of governing this technology are exactly the same. So we need secure access. So agents need to authenticate before they can access your MCP servers, which are protecting internal systems. They need to govern this behavior. We need access controls, granular access controls, tool level access controls, even. So this agent has access to this tool, which can query customer accounts, but it doesn't have access to this tool on the same server, which accesses the payment systems. Also, rate limit and traffic management are key. So rate limiting of no more than 100 calls per minute to prevent runaway behaviors on this particular server. But go one step further, enterprises need a bit more granular controls than that. No more than 10 calls per minute on this tool for this agent. And we also need the full visibility chain, full audit trails of every agentic action for compliance. Your platform teams have to see what's happening. And we've solved this before. We've done this many, many times before. And it's the same principles of managing API traffic. The same principles, the same discipline, the same rigor can be applied to agents. But the question is, how do you apply it to agents? How do you apply this experience that we've built up? How do we apply this to agents? Because although it is a protocol upgrade, the threat surface has changed significantly. Agentic AI is typically non-deterministic in its behaviors, which is a completely new pattern. It completely changes your compliance obligations, changes your operating model. And here's what we've been hearing when we've been doing discovery to the discovery for this MCP gateway. This is what we've heard from platform and security teams. It's been pretty unanimous, the feedback. The need to know what the agents are doing. If a developer connects Claude or Copilot to your internal backends, to internal tools, the logs have to show up on your SIM platforms. It has to be an audit trail. Legal teams and compliance teams need to know if an agent's access to customer record modified that customer record. Can you prove that that agent modified that record? And can you prove who gave the permission to that agent to modify that record? And right now, most organizations can't answer that. We're also hearing from platform teams that we need to control access. So access needs to be controlled with MCP servers without doubt. But this access cannot block innovation because another thing which we witnessed over the past 6 months was the answer to if the answer to the question is we can't see what the agents are doing, the answer shouldn't really be ban them because that's when you are blocking innovation. But that's what's happening in a lot of enterprises today. The platform teams have blocked MCP at the network level because there's no middle ground between full access and zero access. And what the security teams have asked for is they need very, very fine-grained access controls. This agent on this server can read the order history, but can it actually initiate an order on that same server? The controls also need to fit into the access management patterns these platform teams already have that don't want to learn a new security model. And they also need to prevent runaway behavior. So agents by nature are unpredictable because of the non-determinism. They don't just call tools once, they loop, retry, and it's very hard to predict for the developers. It's very hard to predict how the agent's going to behave under certain circumstances, and a misconfigured agent can hammer an internal API. I mean, literally thousands of calls in seconds. And by the time a human notices, the damage is done and you have an incident. So teams need circuit breakers at the MCP level, rate limits on the agentic traffic, the same way that you control API consumers. Um, and overwhelmingly, we also heard this all needs to work with what we already have. Security teams and platform teams have already built up their toolkit. They've got the identity systems, they've got the government processes, the governance processes. Um, None of this should disappear because AI is new. We've got SSO, OAuth, keys, policy engines, observability stacks. Agents have to slot into that infrastructure, not sit outside of it. So the question we've been asked, how can we govern agentic access the same way we govern API access? And that's exactly what we've built. So the Tyk MCP Gateway, 6 months in the pipeline of deep discovery, understanding pain points through enormous amount of customer, client, prospect conversations. And essentially, it works like this: the gateway sits between your agents and your MCP servers, like an API gateway. The agents do not contact the MCP servers direct. They authenticate through Tyke. Now we are fully spec compliant at the gateway level, so we support OAuth 2.1 protected resource metadata flows, but we've also added a ton of other security mechanisms and alternative security mechanisms if that doesn't work for you. When an agent has authenticated and they want to discover the capabilities of the MCP servers, they want to know what tools or resources or prompts these MCP servers are offering. Tyke, through the consumer policy of the agent, will only display the tools and the resources and prompts that that agent has access to. An MCP server may have 50 tools. The agent has access to only three of them tools. When an agent calls the MCP server and says list your available tools, they'll only see the three tools. And if the agent gets wind that there is other tools available, we'll also enforce the policy at the invocation level, but we'll also enforce rate limits, authentication, role-based access controls, all that good stuff. And every one of those interactions is logged for your compliance and observability framework. So this means that your security teams can see and they can control the agentic behaviors. Your platform teams can manage the agents using the exact same control planes as the APIs. Your compliance team gets the audit trails, and you don't need any custom code for this for any MCP server integration. As I said, we are fully MCP spec compliant here. Um, if you're already a Tyke customer and you're already using Tyke for managing your APIs, this will feel like an absolutely natural extension to what the platform already offers. It's the same policy framework, same observability. It's the exact same control plane, and we've had to modify the full stack across the board because there's a number of unique quirks about MCP. But now what we have is a gateway where MCP really is just another traffic type to govern. And if you are an existing customer at Tyke and you know how to, and you understand how to manage APIs using the dashboard, and you understand MCP, you'll be guaranteed you'll be up and running in no time at all. The concepts will be very, very familiar. Um, and before I hand over the demo, I'd just like to say, as I said, I've been in the industry for years, many years, and this is without a doubt the most feature-rich first release I've ever been involved in. It was supposed to be a minimum viable product, but because of the assets and the experience of the business, decades worth of code to repurpose. We've gone way beyond anything that I imagined for a first release of the MCP Gateway. So to show you what we've built, I'm going to hand over to Sedki. He's going to highlight key
Perfect.
features and how it all hangs together.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks. Okay. And thank you guys for, just being engaged in the chat here. It's really good. As predicted, there's a lot of use cases that some are here just to learn, and others have already deployed MCP servers, and there's even an A2A feature in here, which is unusual. And so after I'm done the demo, I'll do about 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and then we can stop for questions. And then Chris has some really exciting stuff to show you for the roadmap, which includes A2A that we're working on. So without further ado, let's get in here. So on our screens, we should see the Tyk control plane here. Now, so what is the Tyk control plane before I talk about MCP? So this is the command and control plane that our customers have been seeing to manage their APIs for the last 10 years. And of course, as Chris mentioned, so Tyk supports every protocol essentially under the sun. So we have open API specs for layer 7, HTTP, REST, SOAP stuff, TCP. We're GraphQL native shop, so we provide deep GraphQL federation, the ability to orchestrate GraphQL on top of REST APIs, and now, of course, we're going to talk about MCP. So what's super exciting about MCP, again, it's a primitive. Using the same gateway that you've been using to manage all of these protocols. Now you can manage your MCP services. And in the future, as Chris will talk about, orchestrate MCP facades on top of your existing REST services and that kind of stuff. Let me just get the chat open here so that if anybody has questions, I can definitely cover that. Um, Perfect. Okay. So this is the last slide I promise you'll see today, until we get to the roadmap. So what I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you. So we have we have an MCP server that's running locally here. So Tyke provides a mock MCP server if you want for your testing. And so pretend it's any MCP server you want to use, both one that you are building as a company as well as one that you are consuming from your cloud, like the Slack MCP, Jira, Zendesk, whatever it is that you're using. Now, instead of having agents or your developers with Cloud Desktop or whatever connect to them directly, we're just going to simply proxy through our MCP gateway. And you, as a platform team, as a security team, you mandate that your MCP requests have to flow through the MCP gateway, which is running locally for me as well, right? And this sounds familiar because we've already solved all of these problems for APIs. We're just resolving them again for MCP using the tried and true pattern. So everything is running locally here. Instead of Claude, I might show you guys Claude or Cursor in a bit, but for now I'm going to use an MCP inspector as the MCP client. But if you guys really want to see that, I can show you what that looks like. Again, we'll keep it conversational. If you guys have questions, feel free to dump them in the chat, and we'll go from there. So here we go. So I've created an MCP proxy in my AI gateway, the same type gateway, and it simply reverse proxies to the MCP server that's running locally, right? So of course, everything is GitOps at type all the way down. Um, we can, so stored as code. We stick it in our pipelines. We can manage it in Kubernetes cluster and everything else. And again, as Chris mentioned, everything that I can do with my REST APIs to a degree that makes sense within the realm of MCP, we can also do in the API gateway. So I'll come back to that in a second. But for now, let me show you how it works. So this is the MCP inspector, right? This is co-playing as agent, whatever it is. This is the consumer of the MCP that's going to connect to our MCP server. And so I'm connected through my gateway, which is running locally, and listen path and that kind of fun stuff. So right now this is unauthenticated. It's just an empty vanilla proxy through my MCP gateway. And so now I'm connected. I have a server-side connection set up to my MCP server from my client, the same one that Claude would set up. And so now I can do things like I can list resources, I can list my prompts, and get some data back from my MCP server. We can see that happening down here. And of course, what most of us are using MCP for today, which is tools, right? Not very many people are using resources and prompts in their MCP servers. Tools is really where the big value add with giving agents things to do. So here's all my tools. I can see a big list of them. I can generate reports. I can let's generate UIDs. I can create users. These are all tools that we've created, right, in our MCP server, and we've made available to our agent. Now, of course, instead of connecting my agent directly to my server, we connect it through our gateway. And that gives us, just by virtue of doing that, right, without even adding security, we get a lot of stuff out of the box. Importantly, analytics. Right. So we get observability about who is accessing our APIs, MCPs, excuse me. So we can see for each MCP server, what's the usage, which MCP servers are giving us errors. We can see primitives traffic, right? So which tools are being called the most. We can see which primitives are being called the most. We can see latency by primitive, failing primitives by error codes, and that kind of a thing. And this is what Tyke gives you out of the box. But if you know anything about Tyke, you know that Tyke is open standards aligned. In addition to all of the stuff that you get out of the box, you can also pipe all of that data through OpenTelemetry to your own observability stack. So we're a very big open source shop. Naturally, I lean to Grafana. Grafana is also this is an open source stack. Everything you're looking at incredibly is open source. This dashboard, the tooling behind it with Tempo and Loki. So we sent a couple of requests through the MCP gateway there as the MCP consuming client, and we got some responses from our MCP server. And all of that data has been piped to our observability stack. Now, this is one MCP server. Imagine again, you have your hundreds of APIs, thousands of APIs, dozens and hundreds of MCP servers in the future, which sounds crazy, but we'll get there very soon. And again, we have one observability stack, as you'll see in a second. We have one authentication stack, security policies, because it's one API management platform, which manages everything using the same primitives. And so what's very powerful is we get things like RPS by the tool level. We get latency and all of the kind of stuff that you would expect to see from all of the kind of stuff you would expect to see from OpenTelemetry. What's really powerful about Tyke is we're very industry standards aligned, which means when we support something, we support it deeply. So for OpenTelemetry, that means we can take one of these MCP calls. There's a good one here, and then we can take a look at the traces. So what this is a trace of the MCP request as it flows through my API gateway. So this is all of the middleware that Type will execute. Of course, we can turn some off, we can turn more on, but this is the ones that were executed now. And what's really powerful is we can see additional metadata that Tyke adds, right? So we can see what the path was, the API itself. We can see who the customer was if authentication was turned on. We can group by tenants belonging to customers belonging to a tenant. There's all sorts of really powerful stuff. And again, we didn't build this for MCP. All of this stuff exists in Type. We just made it available to MCP. And so where this is really helpful is if you want to do troubleshooting, you can see how much latency we spend in each stack and so on. So some really, really powerful stuff just by virtue of proxying it through Type. But let's get into some of the more fun stuff, right? The more MCP specific stuff. By the way, a question a lot of you might have in mind is, okay, so this is an MCP server that's running. What if I want to generate an MCP facade? I'm going to let Chris talk about that. Tyke has tooling today, open standards tooling that lets you do that. But of course, you can. We also have open source tools that exist today that allows you to take an open API spec and convert it to an MCP, and you can see that in your. Um, okay, thanks, Lauren. She answered that question. So we created an MCP proxy. It's unauthenticated. How do we turn on authentication and what can we do with that? Because that's obviously the next step here. So again, because we're reusing the primitives that Type Gateway has, we can make use of any authentication type that you would expect for your REST APIs. So here in our mock MCP server, we can activate any of the auth types that you can do for your REST APIs. We can just do basic auth token, basic auth, opaque tokens, JWTs, right? If you're bringing in IDP like Okta or Auth0 or Keycloak or whatever, you can do custom plugin servers and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to use a simple authentication for now. I turned on authentication. Of course, this got saved in the config, and you can see here. And so now we can stick this in version control and everything else. Now, of course, if I try to connect again through MCP, you can see this time it fails. It says access to this API has been disallowed. We need to generate a token in order to access this API. Another good question there. I'll leave that one for Laurentiu. Um, okay. Everything you see today, Laurentia, correct me if I'm wrong, but this MCP functionality is available in Tyke open source, right?
Yes, yes,
Is-
it's all part of the open source offering. So yeah.
Right. Well, so this is what is really unique about Tyke. So again, if you're not a Tyke customer today and you want to use just the MCP bit, you don't care about the other API stuff, which hopefully you should, is you can go and pull 5.13.0. We just released it yesterday, which includes all of this MCP functionality. Okay, so we'll put this to the right so we can see that, and I'll put this. So now we've tried to access our MCP server. We need to create a token, and again, we're going to reuse the same primitive security policy that we've been using for a decade to manage our APIs, which is incredible because now what we can do is we can create a security policy that has the same security policy that has access to your REST APIs, Kafka, GraphQL, and now MCP. And so instead of jumbling tokens around, you as the developer or the agent or the custom support bot that you're aging in order to consume all of these services, it's just one token, which is incredible. So I'm going to add a new security policy here, and we'll choose our mock MCP server, and then we'll give it a name, mock MCP, and then we can do things like add arbitrary tags like mock MCP tag, and all of these flow into our OpenTelemetry um, tooling, and then we'll hit create policy. So I've created a policy now. Now I'll just create a key, and that key simply belongs to that policy. I can also give that key some alias, like some alias developer, and all of this also flows into observability. You can see the tags will flow into observability. Metadata is incredible as well because we can use this metadata in the middleware that Tyke uses, and we can do custom things based off whatever key value store that we wanted to. Okay, so we have our key now here. We can go back into our MCP tool here on the right, and we'll paste our tool. And now when we hit connect, we're able to, again, once again, access all of our tools. We're able to create posts and users and use all of our tools. So just like that, by turning on a config, we've enabled authentication in our MCP proxy. So let's take it a step further. So in our MCP proxy, let's say you wanted to create more granular access, okay? Because of course, like imagine you have a general customer service bot. You don't want your customer service bot that talks to your customers to be able to do things like delete users, right? Or, but let's say you have an administrative bot internally, which your developers or your support staff use that does have elevated permissions. And so this is where we would do that. So here in this release of Type Gateway, you have the ability to do both of those things. So first of all, we're able to filter which agents belong to which policies, see which tools, resources, and prompts. So imagine we want to get rid of that delete user, right? So we're gonna put in delete user, and we're gonna say this is a tool, and we're gonna add, and you can see it's blocked now. So now I'm going to save and update. And incredibly, because I upgraded the security policy in real time, all of the keys that belong to the security policy automatically receive all of these changes, which is cool because we don't have to go in there and manage each agent specifically or each customer specifically. No, just by virtue of upgrading the security policy, I automatically receive all of those. I automatically propagate all of those changes to all of my consumers. So now I press list tools. You can see that that delete user is now gone because we've cleared it. So let's say I want to also get rid of generate report because this agent that we're building should not have access to that. So I press update, I hit clear and list user, and you can see it's gone. Okay. Now let's go a different way. Let's enable some tools. Let's change it so the only tools that this agent belonging to this policy can see are the ones that we specifically um, allow. So I'm going to add two tools. I'm going to whitelist two of them, create user and generate user ID, and I'm going to block list the other two and hit update. And then so I clear again, list tools, and there we go. So now you can see this agent, Claude or MCP Inspector or whatever, only has access to these two tools. And sure enough, not only, I mean, importantly, they don't even see them, right? So when they do the tool discovery, they don't even see the tools. which is great because we don't want them to try to hack their way into it. Of course, Tyke will prevent them from being able to use this by enforcing these rules, but it's nice not even to have the agent aware of them because now it's not going to try to do anything crazy, for lack of a better word, which is really powerful. Okay, so now let's add some rate limits. Let's say our customer service bot that we're building should be able to use this tool as much as it wants because it's cheap or whatever, but I don't want it to be able to create users unlimited because that can create a problem, of course. So we have to put some limits in place. So here under the usage limits by MCP primitives, we're going to open that up. We're going to copy that tool and we're going to, oh, I'm sorry. This is the rate limit field. So let's say for create user, we want to limit it to one request every 5 seconds. And then we're going to put that tool in there. We can also use regex. You can see you can put regex and all kinds of stuff in here. But I'll just statically put create user. I'm going to put this as a tool. And then I'm going to add another limit to say for generate UID tool, we're going to make it unlimited. So we'll copy that this time. And that's a tool. So then what we've done is for this security policy, we've said create user is allowed to be only be used once every 5 seconds, but generate UUID tool is unlimited. So what we've done, we've created a security policy. We filtered what the agent belonging to this security policy can do because we've authenticated with our auth token that belongs to that policy. And of course we can use OAuth as well. But now if we try to use our tools, you can see the first request exceeded, but the second request I got an error. And in fact, it even tells the agent that this is rate limit exceeded. So this agent now knows that they can only use it every so often. Whereas the UUID, the generate tool, I can use it unlimited. So again, within we have um, one token, we have the filtered discovery, we have the security policies, the filtered discovery, the tool limiting, and also the per tool rate limits. So that's the essence of what we wanted to cover today. If you guys have any more questions, we're happy to cover it. But of course, we're available. If you want to reach out to us and get a personalized demo, you can reach out to our sales team and they'll set up a demo with one of our engineers. So feel free to reach out online. But yeah, that's it. I'll hand it over to Chris, and Chris can walk you guys through the roadmap here. I guess before I'm just trying to think if there's any questions I forgot because I think we're good. Okay. All right, Chris, I'll hand it over to you.
Uh, that was a that's the first time I've seen that end-to-end demo. That was fantastic. No, really,
Thank-
really. Um, so that's what we've just released. As Sedke said, that's 1 day, 1 day old. But we do know as a business, this is the first step. This is only the foundations. Um, and we have a number of initiatives which we're working on to get a fully fledged agentic gateway in place. So let me talk about. We have tight customers with scores of APIs, hundreds of APIs, thousands, some even tens and hundreds of thousands. Um, and your teams, you've already built up this infrastructure, and your teams want agents to call these APIs. And traditionally, you'd need to write custom API, like MCP servers for each API. For really complex APIs with hundreds of operations, I mean, that's weeks of engineering. So with this initiative, what Tyke does is will auto-generate the MCP tool definitions from these existing APIs hosted on Tyke. So then you get that full MCP proxy layer, which Sedke's just demoed for free. Essentially, there's no custom code required. The APIs are already defined. You don't have to touch the existing APIs. We'll just essentially make them discoverable for agents. And that really takes this metric time to agent ready from weeks to hours, and your back-end teams don't have to change anything whatsoever. All of the conversion happens at the gateway layer. So OAuth token exchange, this is under active development too. So I expect both of these. Keep your eyes open in the coming weeks for both of these initiatives. But right now, when an agent calls a backend, you have two choices. Um, there's a first is you can pass through the token, so you can forward the client's SSO token straight to the backend. That token wasn't issued for the backend, that was issued for your SSO system. So you're really sending that token outside its intended audience. The MCP spec does not recommend this approach. And if that token's compromised, it's got a larger blast radius, everything that Alice has access to within that compromised token. So what the established pattern is, the second is a shared service account, and this is what we see typically on the gateway today. So the gateway authenticates to a backend server using a single identity, a shared service account. The issue with this is in the agentic world is the backend has no idea it's Alice. Every audit log says the same thing. Per user access controls are tough, if not impossible, and it's not compliant with a number of regulatory frameworks within the agentic world. So this is something I expect in the next couple of weeks, an extension to OAuth. It's called token exchange, and it gives you a third option. So think of it like this. So Alice's SSO token comes through to the gateway. Tyk examines what tool or what resource or what prompt, what was Alice trying to access, and Tyk will exchange with your IDP the SSO token for a new token, and that new token is properly audienced for the specific backend that Alice is calling, narrowed to the exact scope that the tool needs. But it's still, crucially, it still carries Alice's identity. So when the backend receives a token, they'll see that it's Alice. They'll say that she has access to this one tool for a very short period of time. But what that does is it completes the audit trail. So the inbound token never leaves the gateway. And the beauty of this is this requires no changes to your agents, the MCP servers. This is something we do the token exchange all at the gateway level. Watch out for this one in the coming weeks. And the aggregate proxy. So we've purposely left this one because this is something that happens when you go from proof of concept stage with MCP. You have 3, 4, 5 MCP servers, and you want to move to a production infrastructure. You're moving to production scale with 50 plus hundreds of MCP servers, like we've seen with APIs, and you'll run into a scaling issue. Every MCP server, so you'll have multiple MCP servers. You could have one for your customer systems, one for your inventory systems, one for your payment processing, analytics. And without aggregation, every agent needs to be configured one-to-one mapping with every single one of those servers. Your platform team has to manage policies across dozens of individual servers. So the aggregate proxy combines all of those MCP servers into one proxy surface, one single tool catalog. So an agent is provided access to that one proxy layer, and they'll discover that everything that I have access to automatically. They don't need to know about the individual backend servers. They just see the list of tools that they've been granted access to. And the beauty of this is the dynamic access. So agents will discover at runtime what the capabilities are which they have within this particular system. So if new tools are added to the backend systems and they've been added to the aggregate, they'll appear automatically in the eyes of the agent. If you deprecate tools, they'll disappear from the agent's view at runtime. No configuration needed on either side whatsoever, which is all leading up to possibly the full agentic gateway. And we've purposely left this initiative to last because A2A and the agentic protocols haven't seen the same exponential adoption that we've seen with MCP. We do expect this to change, and it change quickly over the final 6 months of this year, given the conversations of the past 6 months. So there is this push for the full agentic gateway, reusing the new extensions to OAuth and all of the practices we've applied to MCP, because we think that we've already managed every protocol transition of the last decade with the right team to manage this one as well. And so we intend to offer here the same level of security, same level of governance, visibility, access controls, the same rigor to every agentic interaction that we do for APIs and MCP servers. So on that, I want to thank you. I want to thank Sedki for a great demo, Laurentiu for handling the chat. And now it's time for, if you want to open up some questions in the chat, please do. I've been messaged a couple of questions already. So I've been asked what's the minimum Tyke version or deployment model needed to use this. So it's Tyke 5.13. As was said, it's available. If it's the newest version of Tyke available in every edition, including open source. Um, no separate infrastructure is required. It's part of the core gateway installation if you do the installation. Um, should every API become an MCP tool, or are there cases where you'd keep the API only? So should every API become an MCP tool? That's a great question. Not every API makes a good tool or a good MCP server. The best candidates for APIs, I would say, are really clear, bounded operations, very well documented, well described parameters. This audience all of a sudden is for humans. You have to remember these APIs were for humans. MCP is not for humans, it's for LLM consumption. So the parameters even have to be very well described. Um, So things like get order status, or if you want to look up a customer, if that's well described, that makes a good candidate from an API into MCP server. But you've got APIs with some complex authentication flows who are stateful, or maybe some binary payloads. They probably won't serve the purpose well as an MCP tool. When we've spoke with folk in the past, I would think of this as curation exercise. So start small and start with the APIs. The APIs your internal teams are using right now. Don't try to look at the whole catalog in one go. But hopefully the API to our MCP conversion tool will simplify this. Do you have any others?
Yeah, just to be clear about, so everything you guys saw, excuse me, everything you guys saw from a functionality perspective is in the open source product. The bit that's licensed is the UI, right? But the proxy that I showed you, which includes, the proxy, the configuration for it, all of that, that is driven and powered by the gateway. So you can just take those proxies, put them in the gateway 5.13.0, and the gateway will be able to reverse proxy MCP, apply the security policies. Security policies are also open source. The only thing you would not have is the UI and the control plane. And the control plane gets very powerful, not only for the UI piece, it does some smart stuff as well, especially with as you add multiple gateways and you start to branch out to federated deployments, you add product teams, and it really puts the management into API management. But if you just need the API gateway, then you can use our open source gateway.
Does this feature work on-prem? Yes. Every single installation of Tyk features this MCP proxy capabilities. As Sedke said, open source doesn't feature the dashboard, but everything else as it features. This is a first-class core citizen.
Oh, there's a good one for you, Laurentiu. The most recent question is OAuth token exchange. Will it solve role-based access controls? We'll defer that to you.
Yeah, so thank you. Um, so you can basically the token exchange will allow you to understand, especially in the agentic flow, where you don't understand where the request might travel through into an agentic setup, to understand that what in a multi-hop step-by-step flow, to understand who has actioned and what it's done. Um, so if you're looking for that to understand, especially nowadays with orchestrator agents and with MCP servers understanding what tools they're reaching, it's very hard to understand that. So this token exchange will help adding these claims where you can see where the token has traveled through, but also it will it will make the access of agents to MCPs, for instance, more secure, as in it won't use a very powerful token that it received. So it will shrink access to what MCP server needs. Um, for the role-based access control, I think I need to understand more of the use case, but I think that's also achievable right now through the token creation system that Setsky provided. So basically, we support OAuth flow already, where you can have generate JOTs, and these JOTs can hook into you can map a scope to a policy, and basically you can say, oh, if it has this silver plan policy, then you have access to these tools. You have these kind of rate limits. So basically, what Setsky has demoed. Hope this answers the question.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the first step. So this is absolutely the first step. This is the foundational layer. Put a ton of work into building the foundation, solid set of foundations. So you'll see on the coming soon slides, I think we'll be distributing the slides after. You'll see we're currently working on API to MCP translation layer or token exchange, and then next is the aggregate proxy to a fully fledged A2A and agentic gateway, managing the agentic interactions. So this is our year's roadmap, I think, articulated in four features there. I think
I
you're
was
on
going to
mute.
say, and maybe a quick win we can squeeze in there is the portal registry on Tykes developer portal.
But no, that could be a free byproduct. We actually are working on enterprise developer portal integration with MCP at the moment. That is an initiative that's going to be coming soon. And yes, the aggregate proxy does sound very promising. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. If you have any questions about us, you see our emails. Well, chris.c@tyke. I'm Sedkey, my first name at tyke.io, Sedky. And Laurentiu is going to be a little bit harder to spell. If you need Laurentiu, just email me and I'll forward it to Laurentiu. At- and no, seriously, if anyone wants any follow-ups, please reach out to our team, tyke.io, and we'd love to talk to you in your use case. And yeah, just be on the lookout for us as we release more and more functionality here, as we mature the A2A space and everything else. So thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you very much. Bye bye now.